As a professional portrait photographer, it's important to me that I'm always training and improving my ability to walk into an environment I've never been in and find the best composition around me in a short amount of time. Because when you're out on a shoot with a paying client, you don't have the time to tell them to hold on because you're trying to line them up for the rule of thirds or spend a lot of time looking around you to find good compositional elements. If you do this could negatively affect your client's perception of you and your photography business. With that being said, I want to share 3 personal exercises I use to improve my photography composition when I'm out on practice shoots so that I'm prepared when it comes time for paid client shoots. And even if you photograph for hobby and not for clients, then it's even better that you develop these practices and exercises because these exercises will allow you to get better at performance-based shooting. These exercises are designed to have you actually be in the field, opposed to just theoretical advice that you may often hear. You can only learn so much by reading and watching, and you have to jump in if you want to swim. So here are my 3 exercises designed to help you when you're actually out photographing or just before you're about to photograph. The first exercise has to do with pre-visualization and flow. So what is pre-visualization? Pre-visualization is the process of visualizing a scene before you even enter it. In photography, pre-visualization is closely related to the concept of seeing a photograph before taking it. Practicing visualization will allow you to walk into a scene and flow. Well, what is flow? Flow is a mental state often experienced by artists and athletes where they become fully immersed and absorbed in the creative process or action. Successful pre-visualization will allow you to flow. You may be thinking, okay, well, what is so important about pre-visualization and flow? Well, let me know if this sounds familiar. You're out taking photos and you're kind of looking around and thinking to yourself, where do I start? Maybe you spent hours reading books or watching videos, but you still experience this. This is because you may have read books or watched hours of videos on composition, but your scene and environment is not one for one exactly the same as the ones you've seen in your books and in the videos you watched. And there is no worse feeling than being out on a paid client shoot and thinking to yourself, oh no, where do I even start? Trust me. And if you start thinking this way each time you go out on a shoot, then you will start feeling frustrated and discouraged and may try to start forcing things without letting things come naturally, which is not good for any art. So how do you pre-visualize so you can enter flow? There are only 2 steps when it comes to pre-visualization. Know your composition techniques and research the location. The first step is to first know all your composition techniques. Think of the composition techniques as tools in a tool belt. When it comes time to build something and you don't even know you have a specific tool in your tool belt, then obviously you won't use that tool. You didn't even know it existed. The same goes for compositional techniques in photography. You must know all of them so you can know which ones are available to you. In case you don't know them, I created a video on 30 photography compositional techniques that I recommend watching after this video. The second step is to research the location. Luckily, with the advent of the internet and search engines, we can easily research any desired photo location to see what it looks like without physically being there. Let me show you exactly how I do this before going out to photograph. First, I head to Google and I enter in the address of the location I will be photographing in. Now, if it's a photography studio I'm using for headshots, then I'll often go to Peerspace and then check out the photos inside the studio to see what it looks like. But oftentimes, I just head to Google Maps and start looking around. Let me show you a couple examples. The first example is with a client shoot I had for a fitness portrait photo shoot, which I cover in another video if you want to check that out. The location we chose was a 9 Rounds fitness boxing gym. I had never been to this gym, so I had no idea what it looked like inside and what elements I could use for composition. Because of this, I simply entered the address into Google Maps and then looked at the images to see what was inside. I saw there were different heavy bags, speed bags, various weights, and signs on the top of the room. Once I saw this, I started thinking, okay, the signs and bags could act as leading lines and framing elements. I could use the different bags with the boxing gloves to act as framing elements as well. I could play around with foreshortening, and I could get a shot with the bag in the foreground and my subject in the middle ground, also using the rule of thirds. Once I had all these ideas, I wrote them down on the Notes app on my phone and visualized being in the scene and taking the photos. On the day of the shoot, I referenced these composition opportunities in my scene, and I was able to go into the shoot that day and just feel more relaxed and flow because I already knew what was in the setting. For example, I was able to use the signs as the leading lines and framing elements. I used the boxing gloves as framing elements along with a bag I saw in the photo as well. Also, I was able to play around with foreshortening, and I got a shot with the bag in the foreground and my subject in the middle ground, also using the rule of thirds. Everything I planned by just looking at the photos and seeing what was inside that I could use. Here's another quick example from another portrait shoot I had for a beach portrait session for a client. The location for this shoot was the beach because my subject was a bodyboarder and wanted photos showcasing that. The location I chose was a specific tower at my local beach, so I entered the address in Google Maps and saw what was around. In the photos, I noticed some palm trees I liked that could act as framing elements. I saw the sand, and I knew my subject was bringing bodyboarding equipment, so I wanted to do something with foreground and rule of thirds using all of the equipment. And then with the ocean itself, it acts as a great leading line when walking along the water. Once again, I took all of the ideas, put them in my notes, and visualized being in the scenes and taking the photos, allowing me to become more relaxed on the day of the shoot. I was able to use the palm trees as the framing elements. I was able to use the sand and my subject's equipment for use in the foreground while using rule of thirds and layering. And I was able to use the ocean as a leading line by having my subject walk along the water with footsteps that acted as leading lines as well. So in summary, by first knowing your composition techniques and then researching the location online beforehand, you can start to visualize some of the shots. And this doesn't even have to be that long. But you want to see what's already in that setting and think, okay, I see trees, those could act as framing elements, or I see railings, I could use those for leading lines, or I see a bench by itself on a hill here, maybe I could use that to capture negative space. My point is, you want to start being intentional with how you approach a photo session by visualizing the setting and what you can use around you as compositional elements. And if you already have an idea what's going to be in your setting, then maybe you don't even need to check out the area in Google Maps. But my point is, spend at least some time visualizing what's going to be in the environment. Even if it's 5 minutes, and you'll see it makes quite the difference in finding compositional opportunities. The second exercise to improve your photography composition is to photograph the same subject in different ways. Choose a single subject and photograph it in as many different ways as you can. Change your angle, distance, and height. This exercise forces you to think creatively about composition and find new ways to present the same subject. You can do this with a human subject or an object as your subject. So the way I like to first do it is to pick a subject, then take photos 180 degrees around your subject. Take note of what is behind you or in front of your subject at each increment. For example, you may notice some trees or a fence behind your subject at a certain angle that could act as great framing elements, or a street at another angle that could act as a leading line. Once you play around with that, the different angles, now go up and down, changing the angle and perspective that way. Pay attention to how your subject changes in size and what gets elongated or shrunk when you either shoot from a high angle or a low angle. Finally, get close or further away from your subject. This will allow you to add more things into the frame that could either add to the composition or detract from it. For example, close-up portraits with a wide aperture are often the easiest in terms of composition because it's just your subject because the background is blurred out. But if you back up, especially if you now use a narrow aperture, you'll have more elements in your image that could act as noise or help add to the story you are trying to tell. Play around with all three, angle, height, and distance on one subject, and just take note of how everything in the frame interacts with one another. This is more of a creative exercise to just get used to seeing all the different perspectives, and if you photograph clients, I recommend doing this exercise on practice shoots and not with a paying client. You can even use something that's near you, for example, a water bottle on your desk. Take photos of it from different angles, height, and distance, and pay attention to the compositions you are creating. The third and final exercise to improve your photography composition is to analyze the photos you took on a session in post-processing. Oftentimes, a photography composition can be enhanced or even created in post-processing with the power of cropping. Look at each image you took in post and take note of what is in your shot. Play around with different crops to hide or enhance the compositional technique you wanted to use in the image. Here's a couple examples from a client portrait session I took. In this image, there was the palm tree in the background that I wanted to capture as a framing element, so my subject could be framed between his equipment and the tree. If I cropped the image too tight, you wouldn't be able to see the top of the palm tree, and in my opinion, it would ruin the composition. In this image, I wanted to use his footsteps as leading lines, along with the water. I also wanted to use the horizon line as a slight framing element. I also wanted him to be in the rule of thirds for visual emphasis. Because of this, I cropped the image in, placing my subject on the rule of thirds. I removed some dirt in the scene to have a cleaner leading line with his footsteps, and I straightened the horizon line so it was a better frame. Similar to the previous tip of trying out different angles, height, and distance for different composition, also play around with the different crops and analyze how it changes the composition in your photos. In the beginning, you might feel a little frustrated because you don't know which crop to do, so I'd recommend you try the ones you like and save all of them. For example, let's say you cropped an image 3 different ways. Look at all 3 ways and take note of which one you like the most and why. Maybe in one crop you put your subject on the rule of thirds, and in the other one you center them. Which one do you like the most and why? Once you do this enough times, you'll start to get a feel for different crops, and this will also help you when you're out photographing. Because you'll think back, oh, in this one photo set, I had to keep cropping this element out, so if I just photographed it at this angle, I wouldn't have to do that. This exercise not only helps in improving your photographic composition, but also enhances your skills in post-processing, making you a more well-rounded photographer. And those were my 3 exercises to improve your photography composition. The first exercise is pre-visualization and flow. This involves 2 main steps: knowing your composition techniques and researching the location online, either via websites or Google Maps. The second exercise is to capture the same subject in different angles. This involves photographing a single subject in various ways by changing angles, distances, heights, and exploring different perspectives. The third exercise is to analyze and post-processing. This involves critically reviewing and editing your photos after capturing them to understand the effectiveness of your compositions, and then playing around with different edits and crops to see how it changes your composition. In conclusion, I hope you use these 3 exercises the next time you go out and take photos. By practicing pre-visualization, photographing the same subject in different ways, and analyzing your images in post-processing, you'll develop a more intuitive understanding of composition and creativity. These exercises are designed to challenge your perspective, encourage experimentation, and ultimately lead to capturing more compelling and visually appealing photographs. Just remember, the key to improvement is consistent practice and with a willingness to learn from each experience. Thanks for watching.